Hercule Poirot, I've found something.
Having declared his retirement from case solving and retreated to the city of canals to get away from it all, Hercule Poirot is in a reclusive slump. So when an apple heralds the arrival of an old acquaintance, will our mustachioed sleuth take the bait and follow along to get to the bottom of a new conundrum? Reluctantly so. After we've dispensed with the usual exposition dump and the first murder has shocked the group, it's off for another round of sifting through clues and suspects, lists and methods, logic and rationality. Except it's a little hard to wholly deal in reason when it's Halloween in a decrepit palazzo steeped in sorrow, and the spirits keep creeping in at the periphery. Sacre bleu! Which will Poirot lose first, his sanity or his life? Get ready for a whodunit trick-or-treat in a post-war Venice soaked in rainfall and intrigue. Alright, we're back here with another Kenneth Branagh movie. I believe it's his third Hercule Poirot film. After...
Yeah, we've seen our favorite Belgian detective 3 times now with this iteration, yes, at least.
Because there was Murder on the Orient Express, and then there was Death on the Nile, where they had enough champagne to fill the Nile.
They did.
Reynard, what did you think of this Hercule Poirot 3 haunting in Venice, but with the E slipped around to be a 3?
I will say that Kenneth Branagh continues to be a perfectly adequate filmmaker when dealing in non-Shakespearean topics, shall we say. I've seen all 3 of them. I think this might be the one that I am the most satisfied by. Just Murder on the Orient Express is like fun enough, but it pales in comparison to the one from the 70s with Albert Finney. Death on the Nile made me want to die on the Nile, and this one it's a solid whodunit, and it's got some fun aspects to it. It's got some points that I think we need to hash out. Yeah. We're obviously going to go full spoilers and whatnot, but it's solid. I would say it's a fun, it's not going to be on streaming in time for Halloween, but it'd be a fun kind of that sort of situation.
I completely agree, because I'm coming in, I haven't seen Murder on the Orient Express or Death on the Nile. This is my first one of these that I'm seeing. And I will say that having not seen the other 2, I didn't feel like I was really missing out on too much with this one. It does a good job to kind of be okay, here's all the characters we needed to know. I don't know if his author friend was a recurring character from the previous ones. But if she was, I felt like...
No.
Oh, no, it's just... Oh, she is... Okay. She just kind of gave me that vibe. I was is this somebody that... we saw from the other movies? I guess not. But yes, you can kind of jump in if you haven't seen the other 2. But yeah, I enjoyed it. The 2 words I used to describe it when I first saw the movie, I was telling you about it, is fun, is charming, but not necessarily mind-blowing either.
Yeah, I think in terms of when it comes to this sort of story where you have all these little clues and stuff and red herrings, and you're building towards some sort of grand unified solution that he will invariably arrive at. This one, I don't know if I would be rushing back to rewatch it to see where all those pieces were falling into place anticipatorily and having known the whole story. I've done that with, Rian Johnson's probably a good recent comparison as far as this sort of story goes with the Knives Out and Glass Onion, and he did it earlier with Brick, which is more of a film noir send up, but again, kind of this mystery that you kind of piece together. And I'm not in any great... I at no moment had this oh, holy shit, epiphany thing with this. It was just okay.
Yeah, it's just kind of oh, It's like, oh, there it is. There's the little clue. Oh, there's the, there's the twist. It's like, it's a much more kind of like, if Knives Out is too heart pounding for you, this is a good kind of like, it's a good movie to watch with like your parents. I think your parents are just like, oh, let's watch a little thing.
Yeah, it's like it's a little spooky and whatnot, but it's not like anything frightening. It's first and foremost a mystery with some kind of little fun pizzazz thrown in for tone.
Yeah, I think that's the thing I like about it, because it does have a very fun. It feels like a murder mystery. Like it has that atmosphere that kind of like, oh, who could it be? Everyone's kind of like looking around at each other. Everyone's like, oh, what's going on? Mm-hmm. It has a very that spooky haunted house vibe. Like honestly, this is a better Haunted Mansion movie than the actual Haunted Mansion movie we got a couple months ago.
Still, fortunately, have not seen that.
It's nobody else has. Have you seen the numbers?
Yeah, apparently a lot of other people haven't seen it.
So to kind of like we'll go mostly spoiler free. We get to like the first like we'll cover the inciting incident. We'll talk about stuff, and then we do a little spoiler thing, but we'll talk about the big solution to the mystery.
The mystery itself, yeah.
So, and the thing is, we kind of already summarized the basic plot of the movie. It's pretty straightforward, Hercule is retired. Is it Hercule or Hercule? Because
it's Hercule, yeah. It's French, so they don't pronounce any of those vowels or anything. Yeah, Hercule.
Yeah, it is.
Poirot. Yeah.
It threw me off because there's somebody who just calls him straight up Hercules in the movie, like to tease him.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait, what?
Well, Tina Fey has like 8 different pronunciations, so I think we're all absolved.
He's retired, but he gets back on the case because an author friend of his is like, oh, there's going to be a medium tonight, and you should go because I know you're a cynic. You don't believe in the supernatural. You're subscribed to r/atheism, and this will change your mind. So he goes, and the medium thing reading goes awry, and then shortly afterwards she is murdered. She is thrown off a balcony and skewered on a statue, which was a really cool shot, by the way. Like you see like the shadow falling on the statue, and you're like, oh shit.
Yeah, it was very sort of like grisly without being like, it's more in the suggestion of something being like, oh, it's kind of like shudder to that.
Yeah, it's like, it's not super like gory or anything. I think because this is probably just very like PG-13, right?
I'm fairly certain.
I'm going to assume it is. Future editor Daniel can not see if it's wrong, but I don't see it being rated R. This is like pretty.
There was that whole like rant that he went into the middle where every other word was fuck. Yeah. So they might have played fast and loose a little bit.
We'll see. Future editor Daniel, it's up to you. But yeah, like I said before, I like the overall, like the visual presentation of the movie. I just mentioned one really good shot, and there's a lot of there's some shots here where like, okay, like Kenneth Branagh, like he throws in a little bit of pizzazz here and there. He loves his Dutch angles.
I was gonna say he certainly makes a lot of decisions in how scenes are shot. The opening is like, yep, I guess something is afoot because all these images of Venice are canted and nothing is straight in frame, so something is awry. And it's like, okay, I understand. And I think a good in this one there are plenty of like these like bravura camera moves to the point where like, did we have to do that? I think I remember watching Murder on the Orient Express and the final like sort of speech where he lays out all of the basically explains what happened with this murder. In the Branagh version, I'm pretty sure they're like in front of the train. They're like, the train is like frozen over or stopped. And like, they're all in this wind tree landscape, just at a long table that they got from somewhere. And just all this very dramatic, like framing and stuff. And then looking at an earlier thing that I'd mentioned with Albert Finney as that character, he's just like in a room, in a, you know, a car when the train car is just doing the same thing. And it's so funny how Branagh feels this need to like augment, like I don't know if he doesn't think that the speech itself isn't going to be engaging enough and he has to like entertain audiences with this dramatic visual language or what, but or if he's just trying to like demonstrate all the ideas that he can have as a director. It's interesting, but sometimes it feels like a little bit too much Dijon was spread on the stuff, and did it have to go that far?
I think I see what you mean, because there's I remember one camera movement where I was like, it's a little weird. It's like I think it's the same, like they go into the basement and like some crazy stuff kind of happens in there, and he's like rushing forward and the camera's like tracking with the head movement as he's running forward.
Yeah, I was like, does he have it, like he must have had a rig like strapped to his chest. That was such a weird shot.
Yeah, so like there's parts where it kind of does feel like where he's like, hey, look at me, look what I can do, you know? And then he does another Dutch angle.
It's like reverse video game footage.
So it's like again, it's like there's a little bit of pizzazz. Sometimes it kind of gets sprinkled in a way where it's like, okay, that doesn't really add much to the story. But there's also parts where it can be very effective. Like during the seance, things kind of start to go out of control. And there's this scene like Michelle Yeoh like spinning in a chair. And the camera's swinging, and like that's like, okay, that's a good way to kind of show like, okay, things are intensifying, things are like some crazy shit is happening.
Yeah, it's a fun kind of like, not campy, but like it's like okay, I've seen these other movies that have a seance, and how can I kind of do a pastiche on that? It feels a little watered down at points, but it's indulging in the right ways, and I think that kind of scene is appropriate for it to be a little more goofy, because she's very performative and theatrical, and so why shouldn't the movie kind of do the same?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, like because she's very much and she even does end up like getting exposed. It's like, oh, she's kind of faking some stuff, but later on it's like, oh, but was it all fake? Maybe some part of it might have been real.
Yeah. Before we get too far, I want to kind of briefly like touch on just like the opening.
Yeah.
Because like, I don't know, maybe I'm alone, and it kind of felt like the movie, we're obviously wanting to get to the meat and potatoes of the movie and the mystery, but it felt like the movie also was in a rush to get just to the good stuff, for lack of a better term. Like the first, like, I don't know, 10-15 minutes, I was very concerned because it was just so like rushing through everything. And again, I don't need everything to be given to me up front, but it was just like a lot happening at once. And like, you know, he's running away from all the people that want to get him to take on their cases, and then all of a sudden he's met her, and then all of a sudden he's like, you know, there's children, and they're going to this Halloween party with like the weirdest carnival barker reading a story. It just was very like harried in a way that was like, well, why is this here? I do remember there's one amazing match cut where, like, you know, the bodyguard like pushes the dude into the canal, and then like quickly cuts to, it jumps forward and has like them in a different boat like riding away, and it's cut to, I think it's intentional, but it's cut to look like he like the boat like runs him over in a way. I was like, I assume that's a joke, but what?
No, yeah, I remember that. That was amazing. Like, again, that's a fun moment. That's like, you know, that kind of helps, like, you know, I think it was supposed to be comedic. Like, I think that was, you know, that was like a fun little hat trick there. But I do agree, like, with the intro and everything, it does feel like things get a little rushed, and I think that I kind of get into what we're going to talk about a little bit later with the story feels like doesn't quite have the impact that it could have had. And I think a large part of that is that we don't really get super solid introductions for all of the main characters. So it's, so through some movie, it's like, wait, who are you again? Who is this person again? What is the relationship here? Like, I had that feeling with, I want to say like at least like a third of the cast is like, wait, what is this person again? How are you connected here? And I feel like that.
Yeah, they get all kind of introduced at once because they're all there, and then.
Yeah, it's like, with this kind of story, a big part of the mystery is you have to set up the pieces, and then you start to put the pieces together. And I feel like setting up the pieces wasn't done in a super clear way.
Yeah, I think that's a real challenge with this kind of thing, is knowing, okay, I have to introduce a lot of characters in a relatively short period of time, and I have to distill them down to like their essential qualities. And I think it was kind of trying to do that during that kind of like the children's party, when we sort of jump to like the little boy and he's reading Edgar Allan Poe, so we kind of get that he's a little different. He's not like the other boys, and he's precocious, and with the mother, and I think that was when it's trying to sort of do it, but it's so understated in doing that, you're not entirely like clued in, like, oh, I need to be kind of paying attention to the relationships here and kind of start to formulate an idea of what's going on.
That is the perfect word to use. I think understated is a lot of this movie is understated, and what that does kind of help give it this overall kind of like a relatively easygoing theatrical experience. It does keep these things from sticking as clearly as I think that they were hoping for.
Sure, yeah.
And to kind of segue into the again, things being kind of clear. Modern mumblecore kind of struck again here. And it doesn't help that a lot of folks are speaking also with these accents. And maybe it's just my stinky American brain being like, oh, European people, oh God, no. But a lot of times when you have, they're talking to a character and it's like, this is my part of the story, this is my perspective, here's things. Like a third of the time I was like, what are you saying? What are you saying?
Yeah, I didn't have the same experience per se, but I could understand that being the case. You got a lot of different people kind of in these very dialogue dense situations, and so if you miss any little like detail, it can kind of like the rest of the thing starts to lose the thread.
And I might have also just been tired, like, honestly.
It's entirely possible. I know there's like, I have an acclimation period I need for certain movies sometimes, where you have to kind of get in the mode of like the delivery and whatnot.
Now I know one part that you had mentioned that you wanted to discuss, and I'll turn this over to you because you are our local music expert.
Oh God.
But the score, you wanted to talk about the score of the film.
Oh, yeah. So I just okay, I think there's two levels to anything. Like, you can have an opinion as to whether or not you like something, right? And that's entirely subjective. And then there's like the aspect of like, okay, we're looking at this movie from a, let's be generous and call it an academic standpoint, as we discussed it here and we talk about its formal elements. And there's like, okay, did I like the score to this film? The short answer is no. But the thing that bothered me more watching it was like, I was just baffled by its usage. Like, when I think about how does a movie effectively use its film score, like it's just, I don't know, non-diegetic sound in general. I'm like, how is it using this to either enhance a certain experience or kind of contrast against it and therefore draw my attention to some aspect of it? And like, when the movie was starting, and it was kind of that like, just sort of like these like strings, and it felt kind of evocative of like Gregorian chant or something. I'm like, okay, that's, kind of being like, oh yeah, this is Italy, this is Roman Catholicism, we're getting all these pictures of bells. I'm like, okay, I kind of get where we're going at. But then like, there was so much music throughout the entire opening sequence that I was getting like Oppenheimer PTSD, and it's just like so much constant music that's like, I don't really need this. Can you please shut up sometimes? And they did eventually. But then you get these weird fucking scenes. Like I remember vividly the scene where I had to pull up all the cast names in Wikipedia because there's no way in hell I can remember. Maxime, the ex-fiancé, is fighting with Dr. Ferrier, Jamie Dornan's character, and there's like this fucking whimsical like clarinet music that just doesn't fit anything in the scene, or doesn't like tell. It was just so bizarre, and it went on for so long. It's that just sort of like characterized everything. I'm like, what idiot wrote this? And then I checked, and I like screamed alone in my apartment. It's Hildur Gudmundsdóttir, who's done like amazing work in the Chernobyl miniseries, and she provided some like extra material for Tar. She did the Joker score, which I didn't super care for, but it was something. But I was just shocking. It's like, well, I guess everyone needs a paycheck every now and then. But it just, I don't know, it didn't do anything for me, and it felt very bizarre.
Yeah, I don't have as much of like an ear for music as you do, but definitely, because I've heard her work and I really like a lot of her work. Like I loved her score for Women Talking last year.
Oh yeah, that one's good too.
But definitely, yeah, this one I was like, oh, this. It didn't just hit as hard as her other things. So when I saw her name come up, I was like, huh. Really?
Yeah, it's definitely like, I mean, in retrospect, she does favor that kind of more spare sort of like phrasing and stuff.
Yeah.
But so like, I was like, oh, okay, it has her fingerprints on it, but it didn't work for me.
I wonder if we were to like listen to this, like it could be a similar thing where because she probably might compose a lot of like really great stuff, and then in the editing room they're like, oh, we'll just put it in some random places. We might not use this or that.
Sure, how they utilize the cues. Yeah, I couldn't find just like a soundtrack recording anywhere, so I was unable to do any just sort of independent evaluation of it as absolute music, but I kind of suspect I wouldn't be that warm on it either way.
I like that term, absolute music.
There we go.
And I feel like, like how this point we've been circling around is again, the storytelling being kind of understated. There's not as much oomph behind it. But I think what's a shame is that there are parts of this movie where they really kind of nail it. Like, I know you're talking about with the opening, throwing a lot at us, but one of the parts of the opening that really worked for me was when they're talking about the legend of like the kids in the palazzo who were locked in there from the plague, and they do this really cool thing where it's like a shadow puppet theater telling this story to like get the kids in a scary mood for the Halloween party.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I like when you're going to tell a story or have this sort of like, okay, we need to offload a lot of information in that fashion. That was really fun. The shadow puppets were cool. And it's just a good way to kind of like, there's this very, kind of folk tale, fairy tale element to that story, with the kids being, abandoned by the doctors and nurses to the plague and becoming vengeful spirits. So it's kind of fun when the movie just like leans all the way into that. And it's like, how would this be told just sort of at random and delivers on that. I was actually just watching another movie called Moloch. It's a Dutch film about like this like ghost that comes back and like haunts this place. But there's one point when the town like has this festival surrounding this story, and they like are intercutting between like the person who's researching and like reading off the story with like this like school play version of it. And so again, you get that kind of like very story element, which is, it's a fun way to deliver exposition, but you're kind of tricked into being like, oh, this is just story time now, so here we go.
Yeah, it's a very, it's this fun moment. And again, it's like the movie really using that visual aspect there, because I feel like if there was a bit more, if we were able to see things a little bit more visually, a little bit more clearly, I feel like that would have taken this script like even further.
Sure.
Just have like a clear idea of like whatever everyone was doing, kind of like the stake of everyone, because a lot of information is kind of delivered to us just with talking, and it isn't as big a problem as it could have been, because in general, like, I feel like the performances on this were overall pretty solid.
Yeah.
So like that helps to carry a bit, but again, I think it would have really helped to have just a little bit more visual component to what we're being told from them.
I think bringing up performances is an interesting thing to note in regard to this sort of issue that we're seeing. And I really do think that a big part of this and kind of what draws Branagh to these stories is like Hercule Poirot himself. And he seems to be really fascinated by this character and like drawing out all these little like goofy, like he's a very silly man, like he's very serious and smart and like canny, but he's also just got all these like little malapropisms that he's saying all the time. He's always just kind of like, there's always these little internal moments that sort of come to the fore. And I wonder if he's really interested in that clearly, and like that shapes this whole project and shaped the previous two films. And how could you not, when this is clearly like there have been 8 billion versions of Poirot on stage and screen and television and whatnot, so it's clear it's a like people love this guy, and so I guess he's just kind of the latest to sort of carry this forward. So you have that, and then he's very good at casting people to kind of Michelle Yeoh is really fun to watch, and she's clearly having a good time just sort of chewing the scenery. He brings back like Jamie Dornan and that little kid from Belfast. He pulls Liz Lemon in for why not? You get some, like kind of. This was less like super, like, at least from like an American standpoint. There were a few like A-listers compared to like the earlier ones, but you do still have some pretty formidable like British and French actors coming in and stuff. So I wonder if like that kind of crept to the fore and then became more of a focal point, even though that should be in service of like the plot.
Right. That kind of it could be because, and the thing is that they're
just a facet of this whole thing as far as focus goes.
Right. Because I feel like there's different parts where there's a couple different characters who are like, we're not so different, you and I, with Poirot. And it's like okay, like that it's like, oh, it's setting up this kind of a thing here, kind of reflecting on how he's trying to approach his retirement or how he's trying to do this or that. I want to see how this goes, and then neither of those things particularly go anywhere. So that makes sense where he might be trying to focus more on like the character himself, but it doesn't get followed through on to the end of the story.
Sure, and the structure of the mystery as far as like the circumstances of it also are a little more like decentralized and less linear than some of these other whodunits and whatnot, so maybe that also helped to kind of muddy the waters. I quickly skimmed the and then I kind of stopped reading because there are just so many names. This is based on Agatha Christie, of course, but specifically her novel Hallowe'en Party. That version of it looks a lot more like complicated, and there's like a lot more like relationships and people involved, so he definitely like pared it down. And I wonder if in that translation, the kind of like streamlining of it also might have had a role. Again, we can only really comment on the product that we're given at the end of it all, but that could also be a complicating factor.
Yeah, and to kind of go back to what you're saying though, where it's like, there are, because you're talking about like how, Poirot is kind of like a silly kind of man, and there was like some cute moments here. Like I think like one of my favorite moments of the movie was like the medium is kind of like quote unquote like she's about to leave, and he's kind of walking around. He's put on like a little costume, and he goes to like this apple bobbing thing, and he's been super uptight so far, and kind of like he looks behind him to make sure nobody's watching, and then tries to bob for apples.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like,
which both drives forward the plot, but also like I there's this internal spark of impishness to Poirot that I think makes him interesting.
Yeah, so it's like there's there's a lot of like nice like little moments like that are interesting, that are fun. Again, I feel like we're criticizing this so much, and there is a lot in the movie that I do like. I think I just like, I wish it would have been stronger kind of at the end of the day.
Right, yeah, like you can see the promise of something here, and there's a lot of enjoyment to be had, but like it could have kind of been fleshed out a little bit more.
Yeah, so it's like overall, like if you're looking for something kind of like spooky, like spooky but not too spooky, like a fun murder mystery movie that's it's less than 2 hours long, something I would say this is worth checking out.
Yeah, it's a fun ride.
Yeah, we got that there for folks, because we're gonna kind of get into like the spoiler now, like the answer to the mystery. So that's the warning. 3, 2, 1. Forever hold your peace. I knew who the murderer was the moment that the mother was like, let's lock this man alone in this room that only I have the key for.
It's just super unsuspicious.
It's like it's things that only very innocent, non-suspicious people say.
I say that all the time, so maybe I should check my closet for skeletons.
I mean, check your closet for poison honey.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
I have to add...
It's always interesting... Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's always interesting with these kind of movies. I always like... I mean, my batting average is not great, but like... the meta game is always like, okay, what are the red herrings and what are the like things? And so like the second that Maxime, I think, notes that like the honey he tasted is like there's something off about it, I'm like, okay, well clearly that's a thing. But then it's always funny what gets dropped. Like I was positive when the cockatiel got introduced that it was going to be like a thing, because they're like, he was her only friend and he listened to everything that she said or whatever. And I'm like, oh, he's going to say something that'll be a clue. And all the bird was used for was like a gag when it just said, oh shit, at what point. I'm like, you know what? Bravo. Like, you got me.
Yeah, like, honestly, yeah. Now that I think, I was like, yeah, that would have been a really kind of like obvious thing to use it for, but I think it's really a fun idea to use it for a gag there.
Oh, totally. I mean, that got a giggle out of me.
Now, one question I do have is, because when they're doing the reveal thing, again, the kind of like the smoking gun and all this was the poison honey.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, you found it hidden away in like a servant's closet or something.
Mm-hmm.
But did we actually get that shot in the movie?
No, Tina Fey just says that she found it. But there's verbal.
That's the thing that was, as I, because they're showing, I was like, wait, did we see that? And again, I feel like for something that important, you want to visually communicate that, you know? It's...
I wonder if if they were trying to keep it under, it was pretty toss off, and it was almost like this ADR, like off screen, like, I found it in the closet. And you're like, I wonder if they were, like, worried that it might give away something or other. I mean, I totally get where you're coming from, as far as, like, it not being planted well enough, but I wonder if they, like, were trying to walk this tightrope of, like, is this too, like, tipping our hand or not?
I mean, if that's too tipping your hand, then what is... Let's lock the guy in the room all alone.
I'm just spitballing here. Maybe at that point, like, they were, like, ready to make the audience suspicious enough about the wife, and we're like, well, they'll know who, but they won't know how. Maybe it's like,
maybe. I don't know. It's like,
or it's just kind of a sloppy execution.
Yeah, I'm very much a believer that, you want to give your audience the clues they need to try to solve the mystery on their own. And because then it's like, because then you have the smart detective be able to put everything in order, and you're like, it's like, I could have seen that, but the smart character is able to figure it out because he used his unique sense of perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like when you do that and you deliberately withhold that stuff from the audience, or not even necessarily withhold, but when you just pose, like, again, like a little ADR thing or something like that, it's, you want to give your audience a chance. And that means that some people are going to find out the mystery ahead of time. They're going to be smart enough to put it together. But then you get the satisfaction of saying, oh, I was right at the end.
Sure. I guess at that point it just kind of comes down to a difference in, like, presentation of the clue. Like, I suppose you could say, because you get the strangeness of the location of the honey jar, and then you also get just the guy noting that it tastes funny.
Yeah.
So, like, you have a couple little things.
But
my question, in terms of, like, looking at this story as a whole, like, we learned that, Ariadne, the Tina Fey character, is, like, basically suckering in Poirot to kind of, like, play him in order to, like, get a juicier story for herself. But the thing that I couldn't quite get was, like, is she, like, a quote-unquote believer or not? Like, she frames herself to begin with as, like, this, like, again, like him, being very logical and very, like, she's in it to debunk Joyce Reynolds. But then, like, the entire time that she's in the house, she's, like, needling him about, like, oh, well, this seems, like, is nothing going to be good enough to prove to you that there might be the supernatural? And, like, I totally get that, like, she's not being entirely sincere, like, the entire time, because she's obviously trying to, like, get this, she's trying to provoke him or what have you, but, like, pick a side. Like, what was she, I just didn't quite understand what her situation was.
I feel like she was just trying to be like, she's trying to be like, oh, try to stump him so that way she can write about the story that stumped Hercule Poirot. And I don't know, like, was she, like, actually a believer? Because at the end she's kind of like, she makes it kind of like, oh, and you still don't believe it. And then he's kind of quiet. She's like, you saw something, didn't you? So it's like, wait, so does she believe, even though she's, like, collaborating with Michelle Yeoh the whole time?
It's just odd. I didn't quite know how to read that.
That's my answer to that. Just And I will say, like, the actual, like, this story, when it does come together, is actually kind of an interesting one where it's like, oh, like she was so intent on keeping her daughter around. She's like, oh, I don't want to just be alone myself. I don't want you to like go out to the world on your own. And then trying to cover that up basically through increasingly desperate means. And there was like one little twist I didn't expect, which was that the doctor's kid. Are you noticing how I'm just referring to the characters as the mother?
Yeah, it's like their occupation.
What is your name and occupation?
God, don't remind me of that film that old.
Wait,
you make me watch that Cabin movie. You remind me of old. You make me watch that Avatar movie. This movie is worlds better than old. I will give it that.
There we go. That's we'll put that on the cover.
That's the segue.
We'll put that on the DVD cover.
That's my pull quote.
But that's again the little twist that the doctor's kid was the one who was actually blackmailing the mother, being like, oh, I figured everything out. I was like,
yeah, I think they kind of threaded the needle with that character for the most part. Like when the second he showed up, I was like, oh fuck, it's me, another like annoying, precocious kid that like hangs out and like gives Poirot clues and stuff. And like he kind of did that to a certain degree, but like it felt well realized. And then when you do get to that point when it's like, oh, he was the one kind of pulling for it, you do like, okay, like he is very protective of his father, and he is very like invested in this whole situation. Like it makes sense, and it's an interesting a way to kind of have that extra little, twist of the knife.
Like I really liked how they handled the kid character, and again the actor did a pretty good job, because I was kind of like, oh, like how's this gonna go, but he definitely nailed the kind of like this interesting kind of dynamic where like his father is very pitiable. Like his father's kind of like a broken man, and he's like, he feels ashamed that like his son has to take care of him.
Yeah,
and like there's like some interesting stuff that's going on in this movie.
Yeah, no, I think Jude Hill, I might have accidentally called Jonah Hill earlier. I don't remember. I think he's good. I think Jamie Dornan is really good. He doesn't have a lot to work with, but he does a good job of being kind of like, you really understand just how heavily his PTSD weighs on him.
Yeah. And yeah, just like overall, it's, by the end of the movie, it's like, I feel like, again, it could have been stronger, but I didn't walk away like super disappointed or anything. I wasn't like, or wasn't grumbling. I was like, that was pretty solid.
Yeah, this is a very much like a movie that I would turn on an airplane and be like, this is gonna take up an hour and 43 minutes and I will be perfectly satisfied.
It's top tier airplane movie material. Put that on the DVD cover.
I have two great pull quotes for this. It's better than old, and I would watch it on a 3x5 square that moves whenever somebody rockets their head back.
Truly the pinnacle of cinema. So
it's better than my fucking phone, I guess.
Any final thoughts about Haunting in Venice?
I think that about sums it. Yeah.
Pretty straightforward.
Just a nice little kind of confection.
It's a good time. It's a good time at the movies.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, hey, thanks so much for joining me tonight. And thank you all of us out there for listening to us. We really appreciate it. You can follow me, Daniel Goldhorn, here on YouTube. You can follow Reynard / Cinema at Tumblr. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. We're going to be talking about the creator next. Gareth Edwards, the creator, right?
I think so.
All right.
We had plans. I don't know.
Yes, we got plans. We have so many plans. We have so much stuff coming your way. You won't believe it. All right. Well, have a good evening, everybody.
Good night.